Yeah, this chapter of economics actually focuses on the international aspects. See, we have looked at the microeconomics where it is more at a individual consumer level, firm level, market level. Then took it one level up, primarily at a country level, which was macroeconomics dealing with the similar things but at a country level. Now we are talking about some basic aspects in international relations, international trade, international terminology used in international context, and these kind of things. So whenever we are talking about international trade, so whenever we are talking about international trade, we are talking from the dimension of the free trade among the various countries. We keep hearing in various news that probably India is having some discussions with US, or India is having some discussions with Russia, or some kind where some ministers from here go there for various kind of discussions for some kind of a trade agreements, right, between both the countries. That is what is a bilateral kind of trade agreements where the intention is an economic welfare. The reason being, generally speaking, some countries specialize in some areas. Probably India as such could be a very heavy specialist, let's say in jute or in some other cultivations, or probably in IT services. So there are some areas where each country has an advantage compared to the other countries. So by doing, and there are so many weaknesses for every country. Some country may not be good at agriculture, whereas some country is very good at agriculture. So basically, whichever area they are good at, they can do it in large volumes and have some kind of a trade agreement with the other country. I'm good in, my country is good in agriculture, whereas some other country is good in industry, some manufacturing part, right? Probably I can produce more of agricultural products than what I require to consume, whereas the other country also can produce more of the can manufacture more of the components or parts than they require to consume, and that excesses can very well be exchanged or probably got into a deal with between both the countries. This will typically promote the overall economic welfare across the world. So one country can specialize in the production of one good and it can get into the exporting of those kind of goods. Whereas, and at the same time, because of the heavy volumes that it is specializing in, it can even get into the economies of scale also. And and because of, let's say, you are importing a lot of goods from various places, you can always look out for the best, right? Probably I'm not good at machines. My country is not good at, let's say, some machines. So they have to import it from somewhere. So as a part of the importing, I can actually look out for country A, B, C, D who is producing the finest quality machines, and I can evaluate all those four qualities and basically choose on the one as a part of the deal. So there is a exposure to various variety, and because every country specializes in couple of aspects, I can very well choose from which country I should get into. And at the same time, because because each country specializes only in a few aspects, intense competition gets created in each of the aspects. Because probably India is heavily specialized in IT. Now you will find lots and lots of people fighting for the IT jobs, because I mean that creates a lot of opportunities, and at the same time a lot of competition also gets created in that space. So more competition and even more efficient allocation. Probably a country good at agriculture, if you ask it immediately to go for IT, it may not do a good job in this IT. But if you ask them to produce a few more agricultural products, They have a variety methods of doing agriculture. So they have already specialized in that space. They can get this product out at a much cheaper rate. So even when they are exporting it to this, it may look like both the countries are having an advantage, because if it produces it on its own, it will be very costly for them for agriculture, because they are not that good at it. Or in the IT area, if they are the other country which has specialized in IT but not that good in agriculture, if it has to produce some agricultural product, probably a not so fine quality product can come out. So that is what happens even in our regular scale also. The recruitments happen that way itself, right? Forget about at the international level, right? One person cannot do all the jobs. So we are trying to find someone who is expert in some job and probably recruit him. That's how the team is growing. Here also at a country level we are talking of a similar thing. Some country specializes in some aspect, whereas some other countries are good in some other aspect. At the end, these countries coming together as a part of their bilateral trade relationships, resulting in a mutual benefit for both the countries. So this is what we typically call as production possibilities frontier. Look at this. Let's say we are talking about two countries, A and B. These are the two countries, A and B. Here, whenever we plot a graph between two products, two broad category of products. So here we are taking machines and food. Similarly, for the second country also, we are trying to plot machines and food. Now, every country has some resources, right? Like people or capital, or we talked about macroeconomic resources that are available. So skills or capital or land or labor, whatever it is. With all those things, if I say, okay, if all my people, all my capital is used to produce machines, how many machines I can produce? With the kind of expertise I have, how many machines I am going to produce? Probably in this case, we are saying that almost these many machines can be produced, right? Probably around 20 million. This is 18. So probably around 22 million is what I can produce with all kinds of skills, expertise, knowledge, whatever is there. Now, if the same set of resources are redirected towards food with nothing invested in machines, then probably these many millions of food, million tons of food can be produced. And probably if I divide it, probably some money between machines and some resources between machines and some resources between food, then probably all these points, this all these points can be done depending on how much I am allocating towards food and how much I am allocating towards machine. So the graph joining all these points for a particular country is what we call as a production possibility frontier. Means with the kind of resources the country is having, any of those points is feasible for that country. Either it can produce these many million tons of food and 0 tons of machines, 0 million machines, or they can produce these many million machines and 0 tons of food, or probably somewhere here means these many million machines and probably this many tons of food. Let's say this is how this country can produce. Similarly, for the other country, when I am trying to plot with whatever the resources that are available, this is the kind of graph that we are getting. Now, I am bringing in a second scenario that currently the country is producing at this level. I mean, requirement wise, the country requires 18, country A, what we are saying is it requires 18 million machines. This is also one of the possibility which they can operate at. So 18 million machines and 12 million tons of food. This is what is their requirement. Now the same thing if I am going with the country B. For them they require these many machines. How much is this? So this is 7 million machines. Right? This is 7 million machines and 4 million tons of food. This is what they can produce, which means all we are saying is, if you look at the kind of a slope at which they are operating, for every, if we are seeing this slope, for every 1 million machines, for every 1 million machine, they are compromising on 3 million tons of food. That is the way they are operating it. For every 1 million machines, to produce one extra million machines, they are compromising on 3 million tons of food. Whereas the other country, to produce 1 million machines extra, they have to compromise on 5 million tons of food. Now, who is having an advantage in producing machines? A. Machine A can produce, country A can produce machines more comfortably, because just by compromising 3 million tons of food, they are able to produce 1 million machines, whereas these guys have to compromise on 5 million tons of food. Means these guys are very good at food, whereas the other guys are very good at machine comparatively. I am only talking about between the two countries. See, I mean, as a part of the slope of this graph, the slope of this graph. So here, when I am looking at the slope, this slope, there is a straight line, the change in the y to the change in x. So this divided by this. See, from here to here, when I am taking the change, this is 1 million, and this we are calling as 3 million. At a point in time, you say for small change, let's say on this curve, anything is my requirement, I mean anything I am fine. Right now I am operating at this level. So probably a small change, slightly this side and this side. What I am looking at is the change in this to the change in this. Here it is given that this is 3 million and this is 1 million from the graph. I mean, it's not a calculation from any of these numbers. From the graph, when I am saying the 1 million change here, means it's just the slope. If it is more flatter, if the graph is more flatter, what we are saying is the change in x. For a change in x, the change in y is not that drastic. But if the graph is becoming more steeper, a small change in x is looking out for a big change in y. So here we are seeing the slope line, it's not that steep here, whereas it is very steep here, right? And that's where it is coming out that if this change is 1 million, this is almost 5 million. Means the country has to compromise on 5 million tons of food. If at all it has to produce 1 million of machines extra. So one thing that comes out from this is country A is having an advantage in machines comparatively, whereas country B is having an advantage in food. So the agreement that comes out between the two countries is, I will produce your machines, you produce our food. So what happens now, though this country requires 18 million machine and 12 million tons of food, whereas this country requires only 7 million machines and 4 million tons of food. And now I can think of, right, let me increase the So let's say, okay, out of your 12 million tons of food, let's say I'll take care of 6 million tons. This country will say, right, I'll take care of 6 million tons of food for you. You require 12 million tons of food in a year. So I'll take care of 6 million tons of food. Now, so if it has to increase 6 million tons of food, how much of machines it has to compromise? It has to compromise on 1.2 million machines, because for every 5 million tons of food, this country has to compromise on 1 million machines, but it is producing 6 million tons of food extra. So 1.2 million machines is what it can compromise. So 1.2 million machines, it may, so because here this country has reduced the production of food by 12, 6 million tons it has reduced the production of food. So it can increase the machine production by 2 million, right? Because for every 3 million tons of reduction, it can increase the machines by 1 million. So overall it can produce 2 million tons of 2 million machines. This country is compromising only on 1.2 million machines. They can supply this, and overall 0.8 million machines are still extra for this country. Still 0.8 million machines are extra for this country. So they can very well do a trade on that perspective. Right? So they can sell this to someone else. Both the countries' needs are met now. Right? Whatever this guys require, 12, 18, all those are still met. But overall there is a surplus of 0.8 million coming up, which means there is an advantage that is coming to both the parties. So probably it could be shared in some 0.4 kind of a format. All kinds of things can very well be worked out. Right? Now, here when we are talking of free trade, it's basically a bilateral trade between the two countries. Two countries saying, I'll exchange this with you. Right? We'll get into this kind. I'll sell this to you. I export this to you. I import this from you. Kind of trade is what is a bilateral trade. But in this case, whenever a country is getting into more and more such kind of a deals, we are seeing there is a loss to the guys in the domestic. So probably if the government says, no, we'll import these spare parts, right? Or when I say even, it need not be a government, probably the local Indian enterprise says, okay, the engines for our car will not take the local engines, will import them from Japan. What will happen? The domestic industry suffers a lot. Whosoever is producing engines domestically, they'll have the losses, because they may or may not be able to withstand the foreign competition. Right? That, I mean, sometimes we have seen, right? Recently there were so many agitations against the FDI in retail segment. Right? Probably some of the things that were talked about on the same cause, if most of the foreign brands or foreign multi-brand retail outlets come in, probably it may impact the domestic players and small volume players very heavily. Right? Obviously, that could be the case, which because the domestic in the domestic market, people may not be able to withstand the foreign competition, and especially if they are very less efficient producers, they are still incurring heavy costs. In those cases, those people have to leave the business, and unemployment will grow up very largely because of the free trade. Because instead of producing locally, we'll say I'll import it. So earlier, some of the people who were having their livelihood based on the domestic production, now they will lose their jobs, because the country or the most of the companies are importing things from elsewhere. That is what used to be the fear for America also, when most of the Indians go there for jobs. We have observed these kind of scenarios quite often very recently in America because of the same reason. Right? So some argue that the greater income inequality may result. Some people richer will keep getting richer. We are observing all those things. Richer will keep getting richer. But what is being said is whatever that overall gain that is coming, that excess gain can be used for the welfare of the public who are losing their opportunities. But of course, in some countries, it so happens that excess gain, whatever is coming, is going into the pockets of the politicians. But otherwise, that excess gain that comes up can very well be used for the welfare programs. Right? So the winners could conceivably compensate the losers and still be better off. But that's a far away from reality. Ideologically, it is a good thing, but very much away from reality is what we observe. Probably some companies are doing some social kind of program, social causes and upliftment, some kind of foundations. We see some of the companies which are better off, they are still doing these kind of activities, but not at a very great level that it can uplift the entire country. Right? So that is where we talk about the definitions absolute advantage versus a comparative advantage. Absolute is basically the country the best in the production of X. That is what we call as absolute advantage. Probably India is the number one producer of coffee, or Brazil is the number one producer of coffee in the world. So they are like absolute advantage. Whereas in some cases we only talk about a comparative advantage. Okay, I'm better than you in coffee, you are better than me in something else. So probably we'll both will get into a trade. I'm not the best in the coffee industry, but still I'm better than your country. So I can produce much better coffee than what you are producing. You can produce much better steel than what I am producing. So let's both exchange these two products. So these are more of a bilateral. Again, it's not need not be the government. See, what happens is whenever those kind of deals are signed, it's basically like, okay, the government is opening the doors for importing from the outside, and at the same time it is exporting our products to outside. Nowadays we have been hearing news saying even our locally produced premium quality onions are exported outside, and that's what has left the local guys with no quality onions altogether. So sometimes if at all such kind of trade agreements do exist, they will hamper sometimes the domestic thing in the pursuit of international advantage. So here we talk about in the models of trade internationally, we talk about whenever a country is producing or is having a advantage, it could be either because of labor alone, like I mean people are good at, okay, Indians are typically treated as good analysts, some kind of skill sets are associated with some countries, right? Some particular country, they are very slogging hard working kind of people. Probably Indians only go into that category. So that's where US thinks probably let's dump our work on India. They are ready to work for 15 hours a day also. So we can dump our work on India and make them work. So depending on some mindsets do exist. One for the labor, two again with capital as well as labor. So the Ricardian model simply says there is only one factor of production that creates a competitive advantage, which is the labor. Sometimes, as we say, if more of skilled labor is there versus more of unskilled labor, right? Probably some high quality works can be done by these people. But if more of unskilled labor is dominating, let's send high volume works to this country, not a high intelligence kind of works. And again, each skill could be different. Probably, okay, India can produce lots of IT professionals. So let's engage them for more and more of IT works. Probably Germany can produce more and more scientists. So probably for some such kind of things we can engage them. US can produce more and more of astronomical people. So probably let's use US for more of astronomy related things, or probably some other country can produce more and more of doctors. So different services can be availed from different countries because labor wise they specialize in various aspects. So the Ricardian model is saying the sources of the difference is the production cost, the cost to produce that particular product or service, and the labor cost. Labor cost and labor productivity. People can turn around these kind of things very easily in India. So probably India is having a comparative advantage in those kind of works, right? And whereas the H&O model, Herxer and Olin model was saying it's just not the labor, how much of capital is being spent in that particular area. Probably Indians are having good analytical skills, but is India really investing in creating an advantage out of that analytical skills? Is it building some centers of excellence in analytics? So if it is yes, then this country will create a comparative advantage in that particular space compared to other countries. Right? Now, in some cases, what we also see is in all these trades, bilateral trades, we have some kind of a restrictions also coming up. Sometimes there could be tariffs. Any good that is imported, there is an import tax, customs duties, import taxes, all these things are levied, which will reduce the volume of imports. Because if everything gets imported, we can very well see sometimes the current account deficit will come out like anything like our current scenario now. Right? So there should be some kind of restrictions on the imports. Otherwise, okay, I'm finding it lucrative to import, means my local industry is getting completely hampered. If I keep importing, we're saying, oh, probably sometimes it creates, oh, this is an import quality or imported product. So my product is typically an imported product, so probably there is a chance that I can price it higher and sell it in the market here. So the domestic, oh, this is a locally made product, so let's not purchase it. This kind of mindset also comes in the consumers also. So sometimes there should be some kind of a restrictions to reduce the number of import. And even the exporters, they get into the mindset, oh, rather than selling it locally, I'll sell it abroad because I'm able to make huge money there. So sometimes what could happen is imported goods, whatever the high number of imports you are getting in, there could be a kind of tariffs that could be put on that. I mean, like taxes, or there could be quota restriction. You cannot import more than this much quantity or this much amount, worth this much amount. So putting a restriction so that the domestic country production also keeps growing. So whenever the ministers or the prime minister discusses, these numbers will be discussed as a part of the agreements. And probably you have a minimum domestic. So if at all I have to import something from some other country, at least this much should be imported local, or this much should be taken from the local market. Only after you take this much from the local market, then you can think of importing the remaining thing from outside. This kind of restrictions also can be set up for the companies. Or from an export standpoint, a country voluntarily restricts the amount of good that can be exported, because the more and more you are exporting, the more and more this country is exporting, probably the domestic market is getting very badly hampered. The more and more I am exporting to other country, the domestic market is getting hampered, and on the other side, the country which is importing, it will put so many quotas or tariffs, taxes, all these things, which may have to be sometimes borne by this exporting country itself. So it does not want to get into and probably spoil the relationship between the two countries. So it does not want all those things to come out. So that's where it can come out with voluntary export constraints, especially if you are an exporter. So though it's a good to have a bilateral trade between the countries, but again there should be a limitation, right? Depending on the economic operations of the country, there should be some levels of restrictions on them, because otherwise the more and more you are focusing on imports, the price of the imports will increase, and because of that your quantities will go down, because the importers will directly, the exporters will increase the price. See, if I don't put any constraint on importing, okay, you can import anything from us, from X country. Now X country will take an advantage. Let's increase the price. Anyhow, these guys will buy from us, so they will increase the price. Now what will happen to the importers? Oh, the cost has gone up, so let's not purchase it from them. Locally also nothing is there, because the local market has already been suppressed, because these guys are importing from there. The local market is already suppressed. So because of this, what happens is the whole chain gets damaged. So, and even the increasing demand, quantity supplied of the domestically produced goods will increase, but it will take time. Now if this cost is increasing, of course the domestic, now people will start thinking, oh, let's start something domestically itself, but overnight nothing can be produced, so it leads to some kind of it leads to some kind of time gap, but overall it results in the demand for the domestic goods will increase, and producer surplus will increase, because producers now are ready to sell even at a slightly lesser cost also, whereas the consumers now are not willing to pay high. The importers, they are not willing to pay high now, because the domestic industry has actually started growing. The producers are ready to sell it at a lesser cost, but the consumers are not willing to pay more by importing. So the import market actually goes down. The moment the prices increase, the import market also goes down. So generally what happens is there should be a balancing in both these activities. If you can produce everything, no country can produce everything on its own and be completely self-sufficient. It has to depend on the other countries, but it has to be done in a thoughtful manner, as to identifying the competencies, and based on that getting into the bilateral agreement in a better format with the other countries. See, sometimes because of this it could even result in outright prohibition of the investment in the domestic country, right, which can damage the relationships very badly, or even the taxes, prohibition of, or the taxes on the income earned on the foreign investments. I can increase the tax on the foreign investment, which could also result in hampering of the relationships. Because of all these things, prohibition of foreign investment in some industries altogether, this could have some kind of an impact on the relationship between the two countries also. So there should be restrictions that are done, but again they have to be planned out in a very careful manner. And when we are talking about the markets, we have heard of so many terms like this. It starts from the free trade area kind of scenario to a monetary union kind of scenarios also. Whenever a free trade area is being formed, it means that all barriers to, the agreements, if the agreements are getting into as a part of the free trade area agreements, it means that all barriers to import and exports are removed. Any number can be imported, any can be exported. If countries A and B get into a free trade area agreement, then there is no barrier on the import and export of goods and services between those two countries. And if we are talking about there being a part of the customs union, the trade restrictions, they are common with the other countries. If country A and B get into a customs union, then both A and B will maintain the same set of trade restrictions with all the other countries, non-member countries. These are all the member countries will maintain the same level of trade restrictions with the non-member countries. And if they get into a common market kind of a scenario, and among the member countries also will remove all the barriers of movements of capital as well as labor also. Okay, people can freely move from India to some XYZ. So no restrictions in terms of movement of people across these countries. And if they are a part of the economic union, common institutions and economic policies also will be set. And finally, it's a monetary union where a single currency is adopted like euro. Euro is the kind of a single currency for the entire European Union, which is a kind of a monetary union. Now you'll see all these things across the various European countries. And in this context, one more thing to talk about, where we have been hearing a lot on this, the balance of payments of a country is nothing but it's the summation of three accounts for the country: net current account, net capital account, and net financial account. These are the three accounts for any country, and what we see is the summation of these three will always be 0. So which means if at all I am negative or I am having a deficit in the net current account, the country will have a surplus in these two things. So that is where right now if we are at a current account deficit, sometimes we have been hearing some of the news items saying, okay, the country should release some of its forex reserves to reduce its current account deficit, or the country should release some of its gold reserves, which are a part of the net financial accounts of the country. So by releasing, which means the country is in a deficit in the current account, but it is having a surplus in the foreign account, the financial accounts, right? So by reducing by reducing the surplus in the financial account, it can bridge the gap in the current account. So that is what is the typical relationship, and that is what we call as a balance of payments. It's a balance, and the balance thing should always happen, which means this should be the equation that should come up. Increase in the current country's assets and the decrease in the liabilities should be balanced, right? So as a part of the current account, what are the things that go? If the imports and exports go as a part of the current account. So if the imports are very high and exports are very low, this is what will create a serious deficit in the current account. Imports are very high, right? The current country is spending more but getting lesser. This is what is creating a serious problem to the current account. So there is a deficit in the current account because of this reason. And foreign income from dividend on stock holdings. So wherever I'm holding some stocks in some foreign countries, or I'm having some bonds in foreign country bonds. So whatever the dividends or the interest that I am getting on them in this year, they also go as a part of the current account itself. And money received from those working abroad, they also go as a part of the current account itself. So people working abroad and the money received from those people also going as a part of the current account itself. Similarly, when we are talking about capital account, okay, there could be positive so anything to do with the debt of the country. Debt or probably long-term investments, probably it's like a long-term. This is like short-term cash inflows and outflows. So by buying, selling goods and services, the interest. So like a P&L statement. For this particular year, whatever is coming in as well as going out, that is contributing to the current account. Whereas anything to do with the investments part, right? Probably the loans taken or loans removed, I mean the loans paid back or loans non-payable, all those things are probably the assets that the people bring or take away from the country. Whatever you have purchased land or you have sold land in the other countries, all these things, the interest on it goes to the current account, but the real acquisition of those assets go as a part of the capital account. Purchase and sale of the assets or non-financial assets like your patents, copyrights, all these things, they also go as a part of your capital account itself. Whereas the final thing, which is the financial account, is more towards the government side. Right, capital account is dealing, or current account is dealing more and more with the current year's buying and selling, like exports, imports. Capital account is dealing with long-term purchases and sales relating to assets or selling of the assets or patents, trademarks, all going as a part of your non-current assets at a balance sheet level. They are all going into your capital account, and the kind of various reserves that the country is holding, like gold reserves, foreign currency reserves, or securities of abroad, ADRs, GDRs, kind of various things that the government is holding, or the foreign direct investments that are being made in the other industries. All those things go as a part of the financial, and even the subsidiaries, right? Foreign owned assets in the country, domestic government and direct investments in the domestic currency, all these things also go as a part of the financial account of the country. As a simple logic, if we have to look at the equation between them, the net current account plus net capital account plus net financial account should be equal to 0, which means a deficit in the current account can be bridged by a surplus in capital account as well as the financial account, as well as vice versa. So this is what, so current account part is this, exports minus imports is the current account part, right? If the exports are lesser and imports are high, that is what will create a current account deficit. And on the other side, if we are seeing, if we look at the typical, if we look at the typical balance, the equation, the GDP based equation, we defined the GDP as C plus I plus G plus X minus M, the net exports minus the net imports. And on the other side, we have said that the same equation, I can also write it as C plus S, which is consumption plus savings. That is the total income of the country. While computing the GDP, we have used these two forms of equation. On the other side, if I equate these two, I am saying C plus S is equal to I plus G plus X minus M, or probably C plus I plus G. These two things I am equating. So net what is coming out is, if you are looking at it, X minus M is equal to S minus G minus I. S is nothing but individual savings, minus G is government spending. G is government spending. So minus G is government spending means I can say plus GS, which is government saving. If I am removing government spending, what I am left with is nothing but government savings minus the domestic investment. This is the relationship that is existing between. So if this is negative, right, you can do the mathematics now. If this is negative, exports minus imports, if this is negative, obviously this also should be negative. Means the savings are much lesser. Government, the savings of the government as well as the private is much lesser, but the investment is much higher. investment is much higher is what is resulting in the exports minus imports also going negative. So that's where some of the things, if total savings is less than the domestic investment, means these are the total savings. Total savings less than the domestic investment means this portion is completely negative. The right hand side is completely negative. Exports must be greater than the imports so that there is a deficit in the current account. Because when I am exporting it, right, when we are talking of the export should be greater than the imports because I am having more of an investment being done. If I am, so this is the surplus side, that is the deficit side. So to bridge this gap, what we are saying is exports should be more than the imports so that the negative of this will balance the positive of this, or the deficit in this is balanced by the surplus in the other, and vice versa. So lower levels of private saving, if the savings are much lesser, larger government deficit means government saving is much lesser. So this is less, and high level of domestic investment is what is creating a current account deficit for us. So this way, if we are, so on one side, because as we are mentioning it as an equation, if we look at it, this is nothing but net current account and this is net capital account. As we say, if the financial accounts are not disturbed, the surplus in this should compensate the deficit in this, and vice versa. So if this is deficit, this has to be in surplus. If this has to be in surplus, my export should be much more than the imports, right? So this is what is the typical model that needs to be comfortable with while we are evaluating the balance of payments of the country.